Welcome to our Move the Stairs podcast, episode 90. We are recording on Friday, September 1st, 2023. We're glad you're here joining us for today's enlightening conversation.
Yeah, episode 90. How are we up to 90 already?
I
We're
know.
excited to be joined by David Miller. He is the co-owner of Flow Gardens, an indoor cultivation facility in Tennessee that grows premium cannabis flower and also has an extensive research and development lab. I'm excited about the latter part here.
Yeah, that's cool. So Flow Gardens produces flowers, pre-rolls, edibles, concentrates, and as David's going to tell you, Flow Gardens believes in cultivating health and happiness. You're going to hear those words a lot today, probably. Health and happiness through premium quality cannabis. So
we're going to be excited to talk to David, of course, about the three pillars of brand protection PR, the first of which is building customer loyalty, which we know is really difficult in a highly competitive market such as cannabis.
Indeed. And of course, at M&T Communications, we always like to discuss, right, the importance of building relationships with the media. So we'll get David's take on if he does that, how he does it, how it works for him, and maybe some tips he can share with you.
And one of the things that we notice about the cannabis industry is this mantra that a rising tide lifts all boats. During the brand resiliency part of this podcast record, David's going to share some of his business failures that actually taught him some valuable lessons and may be applicable to some of our listeners today.
Yeah, always good to hear. All right, let's get started. Let's bring David into the studio. David, thanks so much for joining us on our Move the Stairs podcast today. We appreciate you being here.
Mitch, Jordan, likewise. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on and talk to y'all.
Absolutely. So you spent 20 years in finance, and you were quite good at it. You did a really good job. You had a successful career. Why the switch to cannabis? What motivated you? What changed in your life?
I'm pretty hard-headed at times, and I'm 43 years old, and it took me about 20 years to realize I need to do what I love. And when you do what you love, then everything follows. The money aspect was something that, and I was always great at numbers, as we had mentioned, Mitch, and it came easy to me. So I went into the financial world and made great money, had a great company, but it just the purpose component wasn't there. So I just took a hard look at what was meaningful, what was purposeful, and I guess you could say did a 180 and went from finance and accounting to cannabis. So it's quite an interesting but exciting change that's happened here over the past couple of years.
There's not really too many companies that we've talked to where somebody isn't purpose driven. I mean, you kind of have to be to work in that industry for sure. It's a passion of love. Nobody is in cannabis anymore to get rich. That is for darn sure. Those days have well, been beyond us.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the opportunities, Jordan. That's a great point. There's a stat that came out, I don't know, I heard maybe a month or two ago that 75% of cannabis companies aren't profitable. So I really think that that just speaks to the infancy of the industry and the opportunity that's out there.
Absolutely. And, part of that reason, some of the reason is a bit of a saturated market. So you're fighting for customer share along with dozens of other companies fighting for customer share. So, as Mitch kind of pointed out, the health and happiness is a slogan that's used by your company. How are you communicating that to your customers? And are you finding that they're resonating, gravitating toward that message, lifting up your consumer loyalty to your products?
That's a great question. So, being maniacal about ensuring that our customers are happy is, one of our core values. Having that customer focus. There's one thing that a colleague told me years ago, very successful with a large family-owned company, multi-billion-dollar company, and they said, the customer doesn't always need to be right, but the customer needs to feel like they're right. And this was in a food service industry. So, taking into consideration that the customer is what drives your business. So if you're very clear on making sure that the customer feels correct and that you are genuinely and empathetically listening to what they're saying so you can improve whether they're right, wrong, or indifferent, really helps to improve your brand and shines light on the, how much a company actually cares about their customers. So what are we doing to kind of put some meat on that bone to answer your question, Jordan, is like if we send out, if we do some pheno hunting and with some of our new crosses and research for our strains, we have a small customer base in that parabola, if you will, of how people adopt new things. So we'll send it to those pioneers in that parabola that call it just that top 5% of what we believe are our loyal customers. We'll send them those new strains. We'll send a feedback and survey out to them, and they'll say, hey, I really liked this one, and this had a strong berry smell, and the back end flavor was good, or the effects were very uplifting, what have you. And so we'll take all that and we'll actually recommend and put out into production our strains based upon what our pioneer type customers are recommending.
That's cool.
Wow. Yeah.
Cool. So, putting customer first is one of your core values, as you mentioned. A lot of companies say that. Well, they need to do that, but let's face it, they get kind of bogged down in the day-to-day grind. How do you keep that core value alive and well in the day-to-day when you're busy at Flow Gardens?
There's something that I remember vividly in the financial industry, and it was it showed these core values, and I forget what the core values were. That was like integrity, customer driven, some very purposeful and meaningful core values, and it was a zoomed in close up, and then it took it back, and the logo that was above it was Enron. And for those of you that aren't, the listeners that aren't familiar with Enron, well, they did some fraudulent things in the energy industry, and their executives went to jail. And so it's all about what decisions, not what are your core values, what are those pretty words posted on a wall or in an employee vision booklet that we give all our employees. It's what conversations are being had, what decisions are being made, what is the communication that happens on a day-to-day basis, what type of cadence is going on there. So not only you're adhering and living out your core values, but more importantly, employees understand it and they see that we're making decisions based upon a purpose other than profit, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. It does. Because we talk to a lot of companies and we say, well, what you just told us sounds really good. Have you told your employees that? And they're like, oh, no, they're just the leadership team. And they're like, no, everybody needs to be on the same page in the playbook, don't they?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think it's really cool that you deploy that tactic of bringing in kind of your top consumers to offer that candid feedback on products that you may be, beta testing and might add to your lineup. My question to you, though, is they had to establish that level of trust with Flow Gardens somehow. How do you get them to that level? Do you have any top tips that, you say, hey, this is how we take somebody from they just tried our product to, down the line, they're one of our top, 5% of consumers. How do you earn that trust?
Trust is something that can be can have immediately and lose it immediately, right? So that's something that we're constantly working on. I think so. Our company was founded in 2020. It's only 3 years old, and it took us a year and a half to build out the facility.
2020? That's a heck of a time to start a company, David.
Right. Little thing called the pandemic going on.
Yeah, I started my financial company in 2008. So apparently I just like to get involved with companies during times of crises. I don't know why.
You're a glutton for punishment. Jeez.
Yeah. Really.
Ignorance is bliss sometimes. But sorry, Jordan, I lost track of the question. What was it?
Hey, that's great. That's good candid conversation right there on the side. But I was talking about how, at some point, the 5% of your consumers that you're sending out, batch and product to say, hey, give us your feedback. They had to come in as entry-level consumers at some point. They built that trust with you over time. What are some of your tips or maybe some of your tactics to move them from entry-level consumer up to your kind of top 5%? You don't have to give away any trade secrets here, but just a generalization.
So our founder, I did not found the company.
Mhm.
He's actually a connection through a family friend, and so I've been working with him to outline our vision. So I worked with him to outline our vision when I first came in and joined him, and it was very clear to me how much he cared about the company, how what his vision was. Once I was able to pull it out of him and articulate it, how much he actually cared about quality and what he did to ensure that quality was in our product. So in the cannabis industry, quality speaks for itself, and it does through your COAs, their certificate of analysis. It gives your
Mhm.
terpene and cannabinoid levels. Providing you a little plug there, Jordan, to go into the R&D if you didn't pick up on that, because you said that was interesting. But so he has had a maniacal focus on making sure that he grows the best cannabis in the space, and we won the Emerald Cup, which is kind of a coveted award in the Emerald Triangle, Northern California. A lot of Humboldt County growers there. If you've seen Murder Mountain on Netflix, um, so we actually placed first in the category of flower last year, and then second place this year. And then we also won the High Times Cup last year, got first in that, and then we placed second again this year. So that was probably a good, I guess, validation in our eyes that we grew good flower and we cared about quality. But I think more directly is that we have a very strong following on Reddit. It's kind of like an
Mhm.
underground way to rep people, if you will. At least this sub is, and um, I won't give the name of it, but there's cult is in the name, so they're very maniacal about quality. Um, and if there is a wrong order from a customer service perspective, or there's a strain that's kind of veers from quality, you will get blasted on Reddit, and
Mm.
everybody will know about it. So we have a lot of street cred, if you will, on Reddit, because we really care about our customers. We really care about quality, and yeah, so that's kind of helped us out there, Jordan.
That's interesting because, we know Facebook is not kind. It's gotten a little bit, their restrictions against cannabis companies have eased a little bit, but it's still not very kind. LinkedIn, we know, is better, but far more professional facing. So this is the first time I've really heard a company kind of dig into Reddit as a great way to kind of build out on social media their consumer base. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see where that'd be beneficial. Let's talk about the
Yeah.
media for a moment. At M&C Communications, we're all former journalists, so we take that experience, we prepare our clients to better understand the media, and then the whole goal is to better position them as thought leaders in the industry. But that said, as we all know, some reporters are better than others. So building the relationships with the right journalists is, of course, very important. So, David, do you have a solid working relationship with journalists? And if so, how did you establish that?
That's been an ongoing process, and so we don't have it all figured out. We went to Benzinga just this past, I think it was around April or so, cannabis conference down in Miami, and I was a keynote speaker there. And there was this great journalist who worked with the United Nations for cannabis and psychedelics. So, we hit it off. She understood the purpose behind Flow Gardens, and that's she. If y'all are familiar with Deepak Chopra, he's kind of big in the alternative health space right now. So she interviewed with him, and just getting out there and talking to the media, and knowing that they're there to bring excitement, which can be good and bad, depending on how it's reported. But they're there to
Mhm.
bring information in an exciting way to the people. So I think as long as you embrace that and you find the right people who are good journalists and really care about journalism, and as opposed to demonizing people, then things will work out. But yeah, so we're certainly not the most adept in the media space, but we're
Mhm.
certainly moving. Um, we're we're moving in a direction we feel like is good.
Well, you bring up a good point because depending on even how the headline of an article is written, right? Because we know that a lot of people see the headline, don't read the article, and then go into the comment section immediately, right? So how how
Or
would you
to your
say?
point, sorry to interject,
Yeah.
they read the article with that snippet in mind, and they already have their their
Preconceived notion.
preconceived notion about the issue. Sorry, go ahead, Jordan.
I was going to say, you are going to have positive, but on the other side, you're going to have the negative too. So, how would you suggest, going about tackling that negative story if media calls? This could be something ranging from a batch recall to somebody unfortunately passing away due to, complications that may have happened, from a bad product, or it could be something about the economy. How would you go about, dealing with a reporter saying, "Hey, I've got this story. I need some comment here and some better insight from an industry professional like yourself."
Yeah, one thing that really frustrated and upset me was in 2008, when I started my company. I worked for a Fortune 50 company and left during that time, and I didn't even know a financial crisis was going on. I don't know that anybody did. But I would get on and hear companies like Bear Stearns, and even some of the big names out there. They're still out there, and they would just give kind of CYA answers, and they wouldn't tell the truth. And not it's not that they wouldn't tell the truth; they just wouldn't be as transparent as you would like. And I feel like people understand that when people aren't given the true story. While it might be logical, it still doesn't make sense from an intuition standpoint. And I think whenever those hard questions come about and there are uncomfortable issues where you need to, even though it might be nerve wracking, where you need to be upfront and honest and transparent, then as long as you do it in a very genuine and methodical way, then things will pan out for you in the end. I don't know if that answers your question or not, Jordan, but it's just kind of how I like to approach it.
Well, being
It does,
transparent.
David, for sure.
Yeah, being transparent, I think, is very important. It's kind of scary, right? I think that's why some companies don't do it. But I would imagine that by doing that, that's helped you build or establish trust with members of the media. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we're only 3 years old, so we can only establish so much in that time
Takes
frame.
time.
But yeah, and we're a small company. We're under 10 million in revenue, so we're not like a Cresco Labs or True Leave or somebody like that. Certainly not subject to the media light and PR like they are, being a publicly traded company. But yeah, I mean, we're building media relations brick by brick, and want the media and the public to know that we're a good player in the space. And when we mess up, because it's only a matter of time, and we've made mistakes along the way. So when we continue to mess up, as long as we learn from them and we're transparent about it, everything, will be all good.
Sure.
Right. And of course, there's a huge difference between, a minor incident. You don't need to send out a press release anytime somebody stubs their toe in the warehouse, but, also, embracing embracing the suck at some points, like we goofed up, here's how we're going to change it. And hopefully others that might be dealing with some similar issues can learn from it too. And it's really a good segue into our third part of the podcast here. It's how we focus on brands that are building their resiliency and strengthening their reputation. And we call that creating a resilient brand. So, David, with it being so crowded out there, with you being so new, relatively speaking, into the space, how are you working to build Flow Garden's brand reputation?
Just every day starts with the basics from a high strategic perspective, is making sure that every single employee understands our vision. We're living that vision out. We're communicating that. We're growing and hiring people in the right way. We're treating employees right. And I did a entrepreneurial master's program through MIT, and we really had to dissect my prior business. And we went through these systems and processes as to how to scale and grow a business. And it's really not complicated. And it's, when it comes down to it, it can get very complex, especially when you have a maniacal focus on all the different things you need to address. But, it doesn't really get complex until the company grows and expands in a big way. And if you set those pillars in place from the beginning, with the employees, with the hiring, with the firing, with the operational processes, and don't try and conquer the world too fast, then it's not that hard.
Yeah, good point. We always encourage businesses to share their failures, and I hesitate to use that word because it has such a negative connotation, but because by sharing that story, you're demonstrating to fellow businesses, the B2B or your consumers, that you can persevere. You don't look at those as setbacks or defeats, but they're really learning moments. So do you have an example or two, or maybe 102 of a failure, a mistake, a misstep, or roadblock, however you want to characterize it, that taught you how to be a better business person and a better entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, there's a laundry list of them. As I had mentioned before, but there's this kind of joking statement that we say in this kind of CEO / small business owner forum I'm in, is how many $5,000 mistakes did you make last month?
Yeah, it's gonna happen. Yeah,
and what can you do to mitigate those going forward? And most of the mistakes that I make and that we make at our company, it comes down to a lack of communication and making sure that the communication is always improving, because it can never be good enough. Because things are always changing. There is attrition with any firm, regardless of if they have an outstanding retention rate. So just making sure that communication continues to happen. I mean, we have errors in our packaging room all the time, and customers will call upset. And the important thing is that we respond to them promptly. We correct the mistake. We'll eat the cost a lot of times, and just embrace it.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I mean, it starts too with what you just said a couple of minutes ago about building inward first with your employees. I mean, how would you be able to improve communication if you didn't already invest so much from the get-go with your employees? So I think that's a brilliant strategy on your part. With it being Q3 in 2023 already, what do you see on the horizon? Are you thinking maybe the next 3 to 6 months when it comes to cannabis? What are things that you're looking out for and other businesses should be really paying attention to as we get ready to close out 2023 and maybe looking ahead to early part of next year?
From what perspective, Jordan?
It could be from any perspective. Could be economic perspective. It could be from growth perspective. It could be from legislative and regulatory perspective. It's whatever one kind of percolates to the top of your brain from the get-go here.
Yeah. Well, economically speaking, I have no clue. And that kind of waterfalls into the political perspective, is that we've had to pivot our monetization strategies in a lot of different ways, depending on the political environment and depending on how the government changes the rules or doesn't change the rules. We do feel like we're in a high growth sector, and we're in a high growth industry. But just in the terms of a year, how it's going to change. I know we have the Farm Bill coming that's supposed to be updated in September. Yeah, right. But I mean,
don't hold your breath.
kind of the one, and this has been probably one of our biggest challenges from a strategic standpoint is you have the USDA, you have the FDA, you have the local in our state, Tennessee Department of Agriculture. You have the, CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, going there through the Farm Bill. You have the state regulations, interstate commerce. There's so many different moving parts. Recently, the Department of Health and Human Services just this week, said that they're going to they are recommending that marijuana is descheduled. Or sorry, not descheduled. It's not going to be descheduled. It's moved from Schedule 1 down to Schedule 3,
Right.
which is in the same category as like Tylenol.
Yep.
Whereas those are routes with marijuana. So that's a pretty big deal. And, if that happens, so that will change. If that goes through, who knows? We still need banking laws to progress. We got kicked out of our bank last year with no notice, and we were doing everything compliant just because we were a high risk from a compliance standpoint. They didn't want to bank with CBD companies, so we had to change everything in just within, I think it was either 2 weeks or 4 weeks.
Jeez.
And so now we're working with a cannabis friendly bank that we have a higher degree of trust, but there's so many regulations. It's exciting for me, but it is kind of a nerve wracking for a lot of people at the same time.
Yeah, not knowing what the future may hold. Hey, before we let you go, since Jordan was excited about your R&D, your research and development department, let's give you an opportunity to chat about that for a minute, because you put quite an emphasis on that. That's a commitment. Why focus so on that?
Well, right now it's not profitable. So, with a growing business, choosing to outlay capital for something as significant as R&D speaks to how much we care about the genetics and quality and customers. But so what we're doing from an R&D perspective is we have a lot of in-house crosses and genetics that we've established with through our pretty extensive seed bank, to where we're strengthening alternative cannabinoids, the non-psychoactive cannabinoids that have that a lot of studies have shown have beneficial health effects. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional, but science is science, and we're really excited about what CBC, CBG, in addition to CBD, a lot of people know that, and CBDV can do in conjunction with THC, what everybody knows with cannabis, that psychoactive tetrahydrocannabinol, what they can do in conjunction with each other, whether it's with fighting cancer, whether it's inflammation, whether it's anxiety, stress. There's just so many different paths that we're able to go down with this plant, and then we're working with institutions to to kind of move that initiative forward. So we're excited about what we can do with the plant, a plant that's been suppressed for quite a long time by the government, and yeah,
that's awesome. I mean, I definitely think that speaks to your commitment to the plant and furthering, the movement here, which is fantastic on your part. David Miller from Flow Gardens, co-owner of Flow Gardens. Where can our listeners find you if they want to learn a little bit more information?
Can't find me. I'm usually hiding in my house, but you can go to, I'm a research nerd and hermit most of the time. No, but flowgardens.com is our company's website. I'm on Instagram, davidmiller.buzz. Buzz like the media, not like the other meeting, but
awesome.
Yeah, that's how you find me, Jordan.
The positive. Great. Yeah. Cool.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule away from your research to share your insights on the industry. So thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Great conversation, Mitch.
Yeah, it was very good. I love the fact when he's talking about early on, we talked about building customer loyalty. I was jotting all these notes down, And that was cool. He was talking about the customer has to feel as though they're right.
Right.
And I thought that was very important. And that's also the internal communications to keep that customer first. Because as we talked about, a lot of businesses set up these little, goals in mind, and everybody turns and gets busy with the process, and they never reach back to them. So constant keeping that in the conversation with all employees will really help build that customer loyalty.
Yeah, and talking about media too, I thought it was fascinating to get David's perspective, being such a young company, founded in 2020. So almost 3 years old, if not 3 years old already. Kind of getting that raw perspective of, hey, you know what, we don't have a ton of experience here, but here's what I would do if something negative were to happen in the industry or just in general, and that's that beating the drum of transparency. And I think in cannabis, especially, consumers are wise to it. I mean, they know if your product is good, they know if your product is not good. So that kind of dovetails into part one and building consumer loyalty. But if you're not transparent about what you're doing through the media or to your consumers, you're going to fail.
Exactly. The other key thing that was interesting in what I heard, but it was great, because he talked about, making a connection with a reporter. And he said it was a reporter or a journalist who understands the business. So that's key as well when you're making those media relations, because some people really know what they're talking about and some don't. So that was really good. When we talked about building that resilient brand, again, transparency, that word came up again and again. And then show how you can persevere. It's okay to say, yep, we stumbled a little bit here. Here's how we corrected it. Actually, that's a much better story for not only the media, but also as a consumer. You're looking at that company going, okay, they kind of tackled that and moved around it. That's the kind of product, the company, they actually have a heart for this that I want to be aligned with.
And I think too, for the final part, looking at brand resiliency right from the get-go, David talked about the employee vision. And I think that, really strongly, and we embody this at MNC too, that you have to abide to and adhere to the company principles. What are your goals? And if you can lay that framework with frontline team members, employees, whatever you want to call them, you're going to be successful as you scale and get larger. And I think that education is so important. So that everybody is just on the same page at all times. That is brilliant to me.
Yeah.
So simple though.
Yeah, it is. It is simple. But again, it can be overlooked, in the busyness of the days, but it's
especially
that
as you get big.
communication. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we want to thank again our special guest today, David Miller with Flow Gardens, for joining us on this Move the Stairs podcast. Thank you for listening or watching. We hope you'll join us again for another episode of the Move the Stairs podcast.